The Sunday Smash is back. You know him already. He's Ira Schoffel. I'm Ben Spicer. I'm usually behind the scenes. Ira, I feel like it's senior day, and they threw me out there to play in the first series or something. This is pretty cool. I'm getting a chance to see the bright lights and everything. This is a pretty awesome experience, man.
Those are always the best. Leonard Hamilton's a big proponent of that. He'll put seniors out there that haven't played at any point in their college careers. He'll throw them out there. And sometimes it's like, man, when's that TV timeout going to come? when can we get these guys off the court? But no, man, glad to have you. I'm sure you're going to be doing more and more in front of the camera because you definitely have the ability to do it.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you guys for joining us as well. As I said in the comments, I don't know if you guys saw that already, but this is going to be a very heavily interactive chat. We're going to ask you all some questions throughout, and then, of course, we're going to take your questions as well. But the good news is this show's a whole lot more fun when you get a win like that, a 66-13 Florida State win over Southern Miss. But I watched the Warchant wrap just a few minutes ago, and there were still little details and little things that you feel like Florida State can kind of iron out and be better at if they want to kind of reach that championship caliber. So it's really hard to be negative after a performance like that, but maybe what are some things that stood out to you that could potentially be concerns or pitfalls down the road for Florida State?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a weird game to kind of recap from that standpoint, like from a big picture standpoint. You know, like you said, 66-13, you can't be too upset about that. And it's not Delaware State. This is a real football team that went to a bowl game a year ago. Southern Miss as a program has beaten a lot of Power 5 schools through the years. So, it's I don't think you can dismiss 66-13, but it was like there was a lot of stops and starts. Like some of those drives in the first half where Florida State scored, they scored 31 in the first half, but a couple of those drives they had to go for it on fourth down. On one drive, they went for it on fourth down 3 times. So, if you're a Florida State fan and you want to see this offense operate at peak efficiency, you feel like you shouldn't have to convert 3 fourth downs on a drive against Southern Miss. So there were things like that. I thought sometimes some of the play calling, it seemed like once the passing game wasn't connecting early, it felt like they were trying to force it a little bit. I thought, they were trying to force the ball to Johnny Wilson and just, kind of get him back on track. And then that kind of kept going sideways. I feel like if it was a game where they felt like they had to win it, maybe they would have called it a little bit differently. And even some of the conversions that they did have, it was kind of totally broken plays where Jordan Travis just runs 20 yards this way, 20 yards that way, 10 yards back, then comes back around and runs for the first down or throws a pass. So it just felt like it was a lot of almost like pickup basketball plays that were less like a function of, okay, this offense is operating at high efficiency. The defense, there's nothing you could criticize, I don't think, about the defense. I mean, it was 3 and out after 3 and out. Corey, actually, we just posted a story at Warchant about the defense that Corey wrote. And by his count, I haven't gone back to verify, but by his count, over the last 13 drives that the first team defense has been on the field, so that was basically the second half of the LSU game into the third quarter of this game, that's 13 drives without a touchdown, which is pretty impressive. And half of that was against LSU. So, yeah, I mean, it's, I think Florida State, because the last touchdown LSU had obviously was against the third teamer. So, there's a lot to like, but it didn't feel efficient. So I guess, as you're looking at this team and getting prepared for a Clemson in a couple weeks and, this Miami team that looks better than we thought, you want to see them start, to play at a high level every week, whether or not that's realistic or not.
You see some stats on the screen there. Here are a couple that stood out to me. And of course, the big topic that needs addressed is Johnny Wilson. I know people are concerned about the drops, and rightfully so. Especially, it's strange to see this one. This was the one that kind of jumped out to me the most, Ira. 11 different players recorded a catch in the game, and Johnny Wilson had none of those. 5 players rushed for 30 or more yards. Benson, Holmes, Toafili, Glenn, and Hill. Tate Rodemaker, that great QB rating, 524.4. He goes 3 for 3, 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. Blake Nicholson, freshman linebacker, leads the team in tackles. Florida State 4 for 12 on third down, but 4 for 5 on fourth down. They outgained Southern Miss 554 to 258 in total yards. 306 to 104 on the ground and 248 to 154 passing. They also held Southern Miss to just 70 first half total yards, and the Golden Eagles completed just 32% of their passes. So that gives you some more detail and some more numbers behind the strength of the defense that Ira was talking about. To circle back around to the fourth down plays, I'm wondering, and this is kind of a more specific play early on in the game, that 4th and 4 where Travis looks for Keon in the end zone. It would have been about a 47-yard field goal. So do you think that factors into it, or do you think Norvell was just in hyper-aggressive mode throughout that game? I mean, me personally, I kind of wondered, wouldn't that be a situation where you'd want to get Fitzgerald a chance in a game to be able to show you what he can do, as opposed to waiting until maybe Clemson when you need him to make a field goal?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think it was a combination of he really wanted to kind of get that passing game going, but I also think I from I'm not saying lack of respect for Southern Miss's offense, but I think he felt like they could put the defense in any situation in that game, and the Southern Miss was not going to take advantage of it. So I think he just kind of wanted to keep his foot on the gas, do as much as they could, work on as much offensively as they could, because I think he felt like defensively they were going to be fine. Yeah, I mean, kicking a field goal might have made sense there. I'll give, real quickly on that topic of Florida State not making those catches, I think you got to give Southern Miss's DBs a lot of credit. I mean, they did a very good job of, fighting through the ball, contesting those 50-50 balls. They did a better job than LSU's DBs did. And that's one position where, you don't have to, one of LSU's best DBs was a guy who transferred in from an FCS school. So you don't have to be necessarily a 5-star player or super highly recruited to be good at defensive back. There's a million defensive backs out there. I think they have pretty good ones, and they played well in that game. So I'm not going to kill Florida State's receivers, but obviously Johnny had a rough night.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the questions that we've been asked is, do you think it's sort of a mental thing with Johnny? Luis asks, do you feel that it's a case of the yips, hoping he gets some easy throws next week to give him some confidence? We kind of saw that, I think, with Fitzgerald last year, that sort of mental game coming into play. Do you think that's what it is with Johnny?
If I had to guess, yeah, that's what I think it is. I mean, for the most part. I mean, I go back to, a year ago, just over a year ago, we talked to Coach Dugans, and he was talking about Johnny Wilson and the drops, because he had some drops in the spring and then in preseason camp. And Ron Dugans made a comment about keeping everything positive, not dwelling on the mistakes, keeping everything positive. And he kind of made a comment at one point that made me think that maybe at Johnny's previous school at Arizona State, maybe it was very negative. And so it kind of wore on him, and he had a hard time coming through it. Last year, I think Florida State kept everything positive. He was the guy, especially for much of that year. And so if he dropped a pass here or there, I think they kept everything positive, and there probably wasn't a ton of pressure on him because you didn't have another Keon Coleman on the other side of the field. I kind of wonder if Keon doing what he did last week maybe puts a little more pressure on Johnny, not to match it individually, but like, this isn't last year where he was it. Like, he was the big bodied receiver they had. And like, now they've got other options. And so maybe internally there's some pressure there, but man, there's no doubt in my mind that guy is a tremendous talent. I still think he's an NFL receiver. I think he's as good as Keon is. I still think Johnny can be more dominant because of his physical stature and his speed and his body control. I think he's a phenomenal football player. I think he'll come through it. But I do think they're going to have to manage that the mental aspect of, when do you get on him and when do you just encourage?
Thing that stands out to me looking at the PFF numbers, I'll zoom in a little bit here. They have Johnny currently ranked as the 477th out of 795 receivers that they grade in the NCAA. And you and I both know that he is a lot better than 477th.
Yeah, I mean, that's where some of the times with PFF I kind of roll my eyes. Some of it's useful, some of it's not. I still think Johnny Wilson's one of the top receivers in certainly the ACC, and I also think in the country. And we'll see how he does this week. I'll be interested to see what they do going into the BC game. Is this a game where they try to force it to him, kind of get him going again? I personally wouldn't. I personally would just kind of let him be just another guy and not feel like he's got to do anything super. Just go play. Because again, I think it was last year, the feeling with Johnny to me was more like, if you come through, great. If you don't, like, there's nobody else that's going to replace you, So there was no real pressure. I didn't think. And as the year went on, he made some huge, huge catches. So I don't think the answer is to put more pressure on him and force him a ton of balls. But I think, just let him play part of the offense, and I think he'll come through it.
Don't give up on him yet, guys. I know some people have been a little overcritical about him. We're just 2 games in. He's struggling just a little bit, but he's got this. He'll figure it out. Just stick with him. We harped a little bit on the negatives and maybe some things that we would change. And like we said, that was pretty much hyper focus. I mean, it's hard to look at negatives in a 66-13 win, but looking at a positive, Ira, that stood out to me was Florida State came out with that killer instinct. We talk about their 4th down aggression, but going with that onside kick when it's a 14-0 game, you recover it. Just all the decisions that they made throughout, it really spoke to me, because you see time and time again teams struggling throughout college football on Saturdays to lesser opponents. I mean, look at this past Saturday, Tennessee and Austin P. That's who it was, one of the APs. They were struggling throughout that game, and they really took until that second half for them to get going. Obviously, App State gave it to UNC. They go into overtime in that one. It was delayed. I couldn't watch the first 7 minutes of the Florida State game because of that. I don't know why North Carolina is still scheduled at App State. You think they would learn their lesson by now. Yeah. But just to kind of circle back, that brings me to my point of Florida State put this team away early in convincing fashion, and that's what you want to see in a game like this. And this is a good Southern Miss team, as you guys talked about on the Warchant ramp. They could make a bowl game. They could compete in their conference too.
Yeah, and I love the fact that not only did Norvell call for the onside kick, but the fact that they're scouting, whether it's John Papuchis, the special teams coach, or one of the analysts, that identified while watching film of Southern Miss that there's a potential there. Like, we're going to have an opportunity here to recover one if we do it. Because the message that sends to the team, to me, I think is one of, look, we're taking this team seriously. We're scouting this team like any other team. We're looking for every edge to win this football game. And Mike Norvell said that he told the team earlier that day, look, when we get this situation, we're going to onside kick. We're going to be aggressive. And I think that sends a message to the players. And even going forward on 4th down, I think all of that sent a message to the players that, we're not just here to win this game and muddle through it. Like, we're treating this team like a team. We have to come out with every edge possible to win the game. And we're going to be aggressive, and we're going to try to put them away. And I think that's a good message to send to the players. And I think that's why you saw the defense particularly play the way they did. I thought they played with a ferociousness to them defensively. I also think even the offensive players, I thought Southern Miss had some chippy guys on their team, and Florida State just kind of served it right back to them. So I think that was, I think that comes from the top down, and I think it was a good approach for a game where, coming off LSU, you might have wondered whether or not they had that edge.
We've got a couple comments, and we got several on last night's postgame show about the ACC Network's coverage. Go figure. Not really a surprise, I don't think, Ira. Ed says, kudos on the ACC Network for sucking again. Get the names right and pictures. Anyone see the AJ picture graphic? I didn't see that one specifically. I'd be interested to see that because I'm sure it's not very good. But I did see this one, and I want to get your thoughts, Ira, because I know you were at the game, so you did not see this. Now, just to provide a little context, this is Orlando Franklin, who graduated from Miami, and he says that Florida State right now has the edge over Georgia in 3 out of 5 categories: quarterback, skill players, and the interesting one to me, defense. I almost feel like maybe you could say more that the offensive line has a better case just based off all that experience that they have, but the defense better than Georgia? That seems a little extreme, to say the least.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I haven't watched enough Georgia yet this year to know whether or not it's as good as it's been. I mean, obviously, over the last several years, Georgia's had the best defense in the country, and it hasn't been close. So that would be a little bit surprising. I'm so old, Ben, that I remember when Orlando Franklin was being recruited out of high school. I think Florida State was trying to get involved there and didn't get him, but and his brother as well. But I think the ACC coverage in general, ACC network coverage in general, I did catch some of the clips. They were struggling with the names without question.
Maybe it's destroyed them.
Yeah, I think there were plenty of examples, but I don't know. I don't know if look, man, Florida State's number 3 in the country now. So nothing's really outlandish when you talk about where this team is. The only 2 schools ahead of them in either poll are Georgia and Michigan.
Right.
And in the, I think it's the AP poll, I think Florida State's got the second most votes. They've got 3 first place votes. And in the other, Georgia basically has almost all the first place votes. But yeah, it's just amazing where we are right now. It's like Florida State moved into the new neighborhood from where they've been for the last several years, back to the old neighborhood where they used to be. And it's kind of, so you see a graphic like that and it's jarring, but man, who else has looked better than Florida State over these first 2 weeks? Not many teams, if any.
And it's important to note, I'd be interested to see how Florida State stacks up against Michigan because, of course, Florida State doesn't have that great fence that Michigan has up there in Ann Arbor. But that, that brings me back to what you said there at the end. It seems like there's not a real certified contender this year in college football that you look at like Georgia has been the last couple of years that you could say, okay, this team's really good. They're going to win it all. I mean, at least to me, I don't know how much you've followed teams around the country, but I don't think there's like a real legitimate, hey, these guys are going to win it all for any team in the country right now.
I mean, listen, when we were at the game last night, I mean, I think Aslan and Corey looked over when Alabama lost and thought, okay, all right. I mean, it's just as you see these teams that, you might have perceived to be the top competition or maybe a team struggling that you thought would have been, the top competition for Florida State. I mean, Clemson does not look very good, obviously. So now you sit there and you say, okay, well, Florida State really might have a really great path getting into the championship game of the conference and then maybe going to the playoff. Miami's probably the one school. If you looked at from what our expectations were before the year to where they are now, I think there are multiple schools that are probably not as good as we thought. North Carolina is another one that, after the first week, everybody thinks, okay, well, they must be legit. They had 9 sacks against South Carolina, kind of dominated that game. Then, as you said, they come out and barely squeak past
scheduling them.
Yeah, Appalachian State. So are they that good? Or are they not that good? So, but Miami is one. I know nobody's going to want to hear this, but from a talent standpoint, they've definitely improved. I don't know how good Miami's going. Miami over the last, I don't know, man, 20 years, they've had a lot of good Septembers and maybe even some decent Octobers, but they have not been very good in November, and that's when Florida State plays them. So we'll have to see what they look like 2 months from now. But Miami's probably the only team on the schedule. Pitt lost yesterday, which was a shocker. Pitt was a team that I thought might give Florida State real trouble. There's Miami might be about the only one left on the schedule that looks like they're better than what we might have expected.
I want to segue now and get some thoughts in the comments and get yours as well because you were there at Doak yesterday. New lights and also new end zone. Now, I asked our social media community about what they thought about the new end zones, and we got a lot of negative comments. So I'm curious what you think. I personally do not like them either. I feel like maybe there needs to be some sort of background, but I don't
more
like
background.
The grass,
Yeah, no, I had actually a personal text thread with some friends during the day when the pictures got out, and a couple of my friends were saying the same thing. It almost feels like it's like they ran out of paint, or they finished. They didn't go ahead and do the background. It didn't look bad. The nice thing about those is it's every game it can be completely different. So my guess is if people didn't love that, it's going to be completely different the next time Florida State plays at home. The LED lights are different though, because obviously they're here to stay. I don't know. Did you get responses? Oh, you're posting some of them.
We've got some. Facebook was probably 90% negative. I didn't look at Instagram.
Now I wonder though how many of those people were at home versus how many of those were at the stadium, because look, I don't love when these stadiums that baseball they do it at Hauser too. Like after a home run, they'll do the flashing. It's dark and it's light, and it's dark and it's light. They're doing it now after touchdowns at Doak, and I don't love it, but it's like whatever. It's not that bad, but on TV it does look pretty bad. It looks like the lights went out or something. It looks most of the complaints I saw on our message boards were from people who were watching on TV and said that they didn't like the way it looked. What was cool though was, and I don't know if they showed it on TV or not, but during the national anthem, they did a lot of red, white, and blue with all the LED lights, and they actually had like a spotlight on the band, and that was a cool experience in person. That was really neat. A lot of the rest of the stuff during the games, where it's the flashing stuff when you score and stuff, I don't know how great that is.
Well, let's hear from our sponsor, Russ Voorhis, and then we will take your questions. If you have questions for us tonight, make sure you drop them in the comments. We'll be right back after this short 15-second spot.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
We've got a couple of people asking us what we're drinking on tonight, Ira. I've got some Modelo here in this Monday Night Football glass. It would have been nice if we were still doing Monday Smash. It would have been perfect, but that's okay.
There you go. I've got a Oktoberfest from Sam Adams.
Nice.
This time of year, I actually just was in the store and saw they had them in. So I want to get in the season. I actually cut the grass this week, Ben, and I didn't die from heat stroke. We're starting to get to where it's starting to get a little bit of fall weather. So had to bring out the Oktoberfest.
Nice. I like it. We'll go down, take some questions. Again, if you have questions for myself and Ira, drop them in the comments. We appreciate all of you guys watching here on Sunday Smash. Tyrone, we kind of touched on this a little bit. He says, good evening, fellas. With 2 games played, do you think the Noles are the #1 team in the country? Go Noles. Personally, I do not. I think Georgia, until they are beaten, is still the #1 team. Michigan, maybe you could make a case for because they've played a bunch of high school teams so far. But I think until Georgia loses, they remain the #1 team unless they just struggle through several games.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Florida State probably, you could say Florida State looks the best right now. They have looked great to start the season. But yeah, I mean, it's, the good thing about Georgia's conference, to be honest with you, is the nice thing about the SEC is, and I know they haven't gotten off to a great start, but we know it's a good conference. And if Georgia's not what they've been, it'll get exposed. Like they're not just going to sleepwalk through the season. And I think we have to be consistent. I think most Florida State fans in 2014 got very irritated when the College Football Playoff Committee and media would say, "Oh, well, Florida State's not as good as they were in 13. They're not winning they're not as dominant." But they had won, 20-something straight games. They were the defending national champions, and they hadn't lost. So how are you going to knock them down to 2 or 3 or 4 in the playoff committee rankings? So now, it would be probably hypocritical to say Georgia should be knocked down. But we'll see. We'll see if Georgia's that good, and we'll see whether or not Michigan's that good. My guess is, because of Michigan's schedule, I have a feeling they'll there's a greater chance of them getting through without knowing how good they are than Georgia. But I think Florida State's got a great chance to be there. I mean, and if they are the best team in the country, this is not like a murderer's row schedule where you're going to be like, oh no, if only they didn't have to play back-to-back road games against these 3 schools. It's a manageable schedule. If they're the best team in the country, it'll be there at the end of the year.
That Virginia Tech Duke back-to-back does
a
little bit.
Yeah. I feel like they might get past the Hokies.
Ian asks, is there anything the coaches can do maybe to help Johnny settle down and not let the pressure escalate like it did when Fitz was missing kicks? What do you think they'll do with Johnny in practice? Do you think maybe they talk to him?
I think they're just going to be really positive and not harp on it, because that's what this staff is. I mean, like Mike Norvell, now he will get on guys if it's a lack of effort or if it's a guy refusing to use the right technique. I mean, if you're out there to practice, he will get on guys as good as Jimbo Fisher ever did. I mean, he can get after guys. Maybe he doesn't get as personal with them. Maybe he doesn't always use as many profanities, but he'll get on guys. But if it's just a matter of not coming through in those clutch moments, like Ryan Fitzgerald last year, I mean, they were positive through all of that, and I think it helped him get through it. And I think they'll be positive here. So I think it's just going to be you're going to see Keon Coleman and the other receivers and also the coaches really kind of lift him up. I saw him in the second half of the game last night. Johnny was on the sideline. I also think he's been dealing with some sort of minor injury because he wasn't even suited up for the second half. I think he's been battling some sort of minor injury, which could be playing a role in it too. But I think watching him on the sideline, like guys were going up to him and joking, and I think this is a very supportive team. So I think that's what you'll see.
A couple of people are wondering, does the construction of the depth chart maybe change and Keon Coleman becomes wide receiver one? I don't really think that matters. I mean, I think they're kind of interchangeable, but people are wondering maybe if Keon is having an effect on Johnny. Do you think that's a thing? It seems like Keon is super supportive of everyone. I mean,
Right.
you guys have called him the pros pro at times. I don't think that's a thing, right?
No, not at all. And I mean, if it is, it's just totally internally. Like, again, I almost tweeted a clip of it last night. One of the cool things when I went back and watched the game was, when Trey Benson had his 40-yard touchdown run, like Keon sprinted over there and like kneeled down and was like taking fake pictures of him. So yeah, man, Keon acts like he's been a part of this team for 4 years and they all love each other. And so it wouldn't be that, but I do wonder if Johnny's putting a little pressure on himself because, hey, Keon just had 3 touchdown catches last week. Like, I want to be that guy too, not to compete with him, but just, I want to do what I'm as good as that guy. I'm that good. I want to do those things. So maybe that's some of the pressure, but it also could be part of the injury. And again, like I said, I'd give Southern Miss's DB some credit. They played well too.
I like David's question because I talked with Tom and Gene about this before we went on for the post-game show last night. We were kind of texting back and forth like, hey, I wish there was a running clock. Like, I don't want to be up until 3 a.m, so we work hard, we work late. And when we went into the pregame or the post-game show, we were kind of talking about that. I'm like, guys, remember like 2 or 3 years ago when you were doing this before Jacksonville State? I mean, just think about how far we've come. Like, this is so much better. Of course, I wasn't here for that, but simple question from David. How much fun is this?
Yeah, man, it's awesome. I mean, I think that's going to be the challenge for Florida State fans because this whole season, because like that, and last night was a perfect example. Where you were 2 years ago. I mean, that team, it was only 2 years ago. Florida State started off the year 0-4. I had lost to Jacksonville State. Even last year, there was a 3-game losing streak in the middle of last season. Florida State last year started off hot 4-0, then the 3-game losing streak. And at that point, we all thought the last 5 games was going to be the hardest part of the schedule. So we were like, oh man, this team may not win 8 games. That we thought that was the basement. What's going to happen if Mike Norvell only wins 7 games this year? And so that wasn't that long ago. That was less than a year ago. Yeah. So to sit here now and like nitpick a 66-13 win seems silly, but I also get it because this team's great. This team can play great. And so you just want to see that because you don't have that many opportunities like this. I think if you're a Florida State fan, you see it both ways. On the one hand, you say, let's appreciate this because we know you're not guaranteed of having it. On the other hand, it's like, let's take advantage of this because, how many opportunities you're going to have a team this loaded with a quarterback like Jordan Travis.
For me personally, I'm just glad because I know when I first came on with you guys, we played Boston College first, and then it was the 3-game losing streak. So I'm like, oh no, I'm bad luck. I'm a bad omen. They're going to think that I brought some bad luck or something. So I'm glad to see that things have improved since then because I was a little nervous when Florida State started 1-3 after I was hired last year.
Yeah, and I tweeted out the stat earlier. FSU put it in their game notes that over the last 8 games, Florida State's the only team in the country that has scored at least 35 points in 8 straight games. Only team in the country. And it's pretty impressive.
That includes the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Iowas. I just had to fit that in there so anyone knows. Speaking of vanilla play calling in Iowa, Jason wonders, do you think the offensive play calling was a little more vanilla last night? We've had a lot of these type of questions, people speculating maybe Florida State doesn't want to put certain things on film or they do want to put certain things on film in a game like Southern Miss. It's a good opportunity to do that. Did you see the offense as being a little more vanilla last night?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe a little bit, but also like to your point, I mean, I think everything that they're doing right now is for a reason. I think that whether it's Mike Norvell in the offensive plays, whether it's Adam Fuller in the defensive plays, it's all for a reason, whether it's to show something to, teams in the next few weeks or whether it's to not show something for teams in the next few weeks. So it's hard to know exactly. But I felt like it was more about like giving guys chances to win one-on-ones, and they did some and they didn't some. So
Hi, Jinx. Thank you for the contribution. We greatly appreciate you. We could not dive very deep into your question, though. However, he says, "Evening, gents. What's the status of Dent, and was Wilson physically hurt or just removed from the game in the second half? Keep climbing and go Noles." We're not allowed to go into the status of injuries.
Well. It's a little bit different on a game day.
Okay.
So yeah, just to clarify for people watching, if guys get hurt during practice, like the way it's treated is we're it's a privilege. We're giving the opportunity to come to practice, and we're not supposed to report from injuries we see at practice because 95% of the schools in the country don't let the media at their practices,
Right.
so they would never know those things. So that's kind of the plan there. But during games, when guys leave a game to go to the injury tent or they go to the locker room, or they come out in street clothes, we can talk about that. Or if guys are in boots on the sideline, those things we can't talk about because everybody's there to see it. Akeem Dent did. All we know for sure is it did look like he was kind of grabbing his hamstring, and then he came back and was on the sideline street clothes. I think it's a very good sign. Again, I'm not a doctor and I didn't examine him, but I think it's a good sign. He was walking. He didn't look like he was walking in pain or anything. So you'd like to think maybe it was just a cramp or something like that. You're hoping that that's what it is, and that once he and it was a Southern Miss game, so there's no reason to try to get him back in the game. But he didn't seem to be. He was on crutches after the game. He didn't. It wasn't like he stayed in the locker room and had to go X-rays. So I think that's all positive. We'll have to see this week whether or not he's able to play. And then Johnny Wilson was in street clothes, which again, I think he's probably dealing with something minor. I just can tell you that if you watch the practice videos, there have been days where he's been in a green jersey, which could mean that he's dealing with something. So we'll have to see, but I don't think it's anything major with either one of those, at least from what we could tell.
We appreciate everyone watching Sunday Smash tonight. If you have any more comments, drop them below. We've still got some more start here that we're going to get to here momentarily. Big thanks to Russ Voorhis for making this possible. If you need insurance coverage in Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, give our guy Russ a call. He's a big Florida State fan, and he's been a big supporter of Warchant over the years, so we appreciate you, Russ.
Yeah, for sure. Russ Voorhis, russvoorhis.com is the website. You guys saw the cool commercial earlier with the lovely jingle. And and I would give him a chance. There's a lot of competition in that industry, and it's a challenging time, I think, in that industry. But Russ is a really good guy. And, I think I feel good about telling you to give him a shot with your business.
Lee feels good about our tight end room, and how could you not through the first two games? He says, "Great show, guys. Do you look for continued or increased usage of the tight end room?" I think, Ira, that's situational. It kind of depends on matchups of the teams that you're going up against. But certainly they've given you plenty to be excited about through two games.
Yeah, think about that game yesterday. They scored 66 points, and you got no catches from Johnny Wilson. I don't know if Jaheim Bell had a catch. I can't remember. If he did, he didn't do a lot. It wasn't anything quite like he did in the first game. So those are your two of your top weapons that really were not part of that offensive output. I think they're going to be a huge part of everything they do. I was really glad to see Marquiston Douglas have that play last night because I thought he's had a great camp. And he's a guy that was a big contributor last year. He's not one of the starters right now. Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock are the starters at tight end. And, you kind of wondered how Marquiston would fit in. It was great to see him get that catch. And you could see, man, that dude's he's 285 pounds, but he can really run. And it would have been nice to see somebody try to tackle him once he got a full head of steam. But that was a really nice play for him. And, yeah, I think all three of those tight ends are going to be a big part of the offense.
I was kind of laughing earlier. I was on Twitter and I saw a page that shared the video of his big play.
And they said he weighed 350 or something?
387 or something like that. And he quoted it and he was like, "Hey, now."
Yeah. That's that'll be the new thing. Like I've seen some people say Johnny Wilson's 7 feet tall. And I think now the Marquiston Douglas being 380 pounds will be the next one.
Jaheim Bell actually did not have a catch last night, by the way. So Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, two of Florida State's most potent weapons, did not record receptions last night. Worth mentioning, Marquiston Douglas, Kyle Morlock both had one catch each. Biscuit's catch was for a 42-yard touchdown. Kyle Morlock's was for 29. So it just shows you all the weapons in that tight end room. Moving on now to William. He's got a question that Involves Jimbo Fisher. Your guy says, will he get to put up a Christmas tree this year? It is not looking good in College Station, Ira, after that performance against Miami.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, it's a good question. That would be I wonder what would happen. So say Jimbo, well, now I guess he lives on a ranch. Back then, when he was here, he lived in Golden Eagle. So when that Christmas tree was in the yard, Florida State fans saw it, in the neighborhood. I think now he probably lives behind 12 gated walls, and he's probably got snipers.
He's learned his lesson.
Guard dogs. It's a compound, so I doubt we'll see a Christmas tree. But man, they're what's funny about that, and again, I'm not gloating too much, but maybe a little bit. But some of the media that cover Texas A&M, when Jimbo went to Texas A&M, and a lot of the Florida State media were basically like, look, man, this thing was going in the wrong direction anyway. They were 5-6 when he left. The programs, the weight room had been neglected. Academics were kind of neglected. There was no accountability. There were so many. We did the Jimbo Chronicles at Warchant where people could read all the stuff, all the things that were going wrong behind the scenes. And when we talked about that, some of the media at Texas A&M were like, "Oh, you guys are just butthurt because you lost Jimbo Fisher," and it's like, no, man, y'all can have him. And now those media are just killing him. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. They still owe him like $70-something million, so I don't know what they can do about it. But that's a tough loss for them because they didn't look great, and they've got some other games this season that I think could go the wrong way for them.
I like this question from John because I feel like there's several avenues we can go with this one. Which freshman looked most impressive? There were several in the secondary. I think for me personally, Blake Nicholson. Him leading the way in tackles. Obviously, he played a significant part of that second half, but I was impressed with him, Ira. I thought he looked good. He had a couple plays in coverage. I mean, he was all over the place.
Yeah, he is really good. And he's a guy that, again, like sometimes we get caught up in measurables. When he came into camp, he had all the hype in the world. We all saw his stats in high school. His film looked great. But, he's kind of thin for a college linebacker. And you could see how well he ran. But I just wondered how he would, how physical he would be as a true freshman, or if he'd need to put on more size. But no, I think he looks good. I think he's going to be a star for Florida State in that defense for the next couple of years after this one. I love the freshman DBs. Conrad Hussey almost had an interception. Edwin Joseph is a really talented guy. KJ Kirkland, Quindarius Jones. I thought you saw glimpses of him at corner. And Vandrevius Jacobs had a really nice play. Hakeem Williams gets better and better. Hakeem Williams is like legit in that main receiver rotation now, and continues to block well. And that's there's so much hype on Mike Norvell as a transfer portal guy and what this staff has done in the portal, but this freshman class is legit. So I think there's a bunch of those guys. And Matt Lasser is actually writing a story for us that'll be up on the site probably tonight about all the freshmen who played, how they contributed, how many snaps they played, and all that. And it's a lot. I think it's over 30 freshmen / true freshmen / redshirt freshmen that played in that game, and a lot of them actually contributed.
Lane is asking another Johnny question. He says, Ira, quick question. I'm a huge Johnny fan. Don't get me wrong. Just curious to see how the game last night affects Johnny's play at practice. Can we get a dropped ball count at practice this week? We've got a bunch of Johnny Wilson questions so far. So I wanted to get that one up there.
Yeah. I think the sentiment there, Lane, is what I think the first part of it, at least, is probably the mentality I think FSU fans should have is, man, this guy he was awesome at times last year. And he had some drop passes last year as well. And there are times at practice, I'm telling you, there are days of practice where he is unbelievable. And he's had times in games where he's been unbelievable. So to me, it's like, it's almost like having a guy that can hit, 480-foot home runs, but he's going to strike out a good bit. You have that balance. But I don't think harping on the strikeouts is the answer. So, no, we're not going to report the drop ball counts because I don't think that's helpful in this situation. And we're not there to embarrass guys. We're there to get context of what the team's doing. So, we will report things that happen, but I don't think we're going to do a special breakout of all his drop passes. So, again, I'm sure I sound Pollyanna, but I think he'll come through it just because we've seen him do it before.
Jacob, he's our guy in Alabama. I believe that's Jacob in the heart of Crimson Tide country. Hopefully those tears haven't rolled on you too much from that loss to Texas over the weekend there in Alabama. I think Auburn won, though, so maybe there's some happy people at
They
least
did.
in the state. I had that on in the background, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. It was kind of boring. But he asks, I think we can go undefeated and make the playoffs, and I think we can win the ACC. What do you think will be the toughest game? We kind of had some premonition, I can't say that. I'm not even going to try. You know what I'm trying to say, though. Help me out here, Ira. We had that in the preseason of maybe some games that would be tough, but I'm wondering if that's changed 2 games into the season for you.
I mean, yesterday changed it a little bit for me. You know, we'll see. I mean, one game doesn't change everything. I've all along been looking as that Pitt game is a challenge because it's going to be on the road. You know, it could be cold weather. We'll see how it is when they get there. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Yeah, they're just a really good defensive team. They're usually a really mature team. I think Narduzzi does a good job. They play hard. They're physical. And at that point in the season, you know, I could see maybe Florida State at some point they're not going to play as well as they have been playing. But Miami got my attention a little bit yesterday. I mean, that was you know, they're physically. I had heard a lot of things in the offseason, and I still think they exist, about things behind the scenes, about the coaching staff and whether and how well they get along together, how the chemistry is between the players and the coaches, and some of that stuff I think is still there. So I'm curious whether or not they'll maintain it through the whole season. But from a physical standpoint, you can't deny they brought in some really impressive offensive linemen. They've got some impressive defensive backs. Hopefully the Kitchens guy is okay from his injury, but James Williams is a beast at safety. They've got a lot of really nice players. So that game, I think, and it's a rivalry game, and Florida State's kind of, you know, gotten the best of them. So that game is, I think is going to be a big test.
Sorry, I'm muted there. My cat is at the door meowing very loudly. Hopefully you guys.
One other game that, you know, and I think Duke will be a decent game. I mean, I don't think it's a game Florida State's going to lose, but, you know, I mean, Duke looks, they're an older, competent, solid football team with a pretty good quarterback, athletic quarterback. So that's, you know, there's some games on the schedule that are not going to be just, you know, cruising through them.
This might be an unpopular opinion, especially how bad they looked against Duke and Charleston Southern, but Clemson, that's still the monkey on the back or the tiger on the back. You've got to get over that hump if you want to get to where you want to be. So that, for me, I know that's a cop-out at this point, but I just think that's still a big game, Ira.
No, it's worth noting, especially because it's a tough place to play, man. Like, I've gone over the last 20-something years, I've gone to Death Valley double-digit times, and there have been times where Florida State was the better team and did not play well there. So it's not just about this last 7-game win streak that Clemson has in the rivalry, which is crazy, but it's also, even when Florida State's been great, there have been times they've had a hard time winning there. So, you know, no, it's definitely worth acknowledging.
Octavio has a fashion question, and I'm here for it. He says, do you think the black color scheme for Norvell brought a new vibe? I know everyone was high on the hoodie last year. Everyone seems to like the black Grim Reaper look this year, though, Ira.
It is funny. So he auctioned off the gray hoodie at the end of last season for charity, and a friend of the Warchant family actually bought it, and he's actually, I know he brought it for the first game against LSU. I don't know if he brought it back this past week, but Norvell switched. He went to the black hoodie, and yeah, man, people I think are thinking there may be a new vibe. Listen, man, he should be confident, and he should coach with a some sort of a, you know, kind of a killer instinct, because this is a team that has that ability. You know, what's kind of interesting about that is when I wrote a story up on the website earlier today about Norvell being very aggressive, the onside kicks, the 4th down tries. You know, if you think about it, this is how he was even trying to coach in 2020, in 2021. Like, you know, people think back to some of those games where he would go for it, like that Notre Dame game or NC State game at home, where he went for it on his own territory and it went sideways. They didn't get it. NC State goes and blows the game open, and people are so mad. And when we talked to Norvell afterwards, he's like, I'm trying to win the football game. Like, he's never been when you don't have the talent of the other team, some coaches in college football will just keep it close. They'll do everything they can to just not get embarrassed. And there's something to be said for that because, maybe theoretically you give yourself a chance to maybe win it at the end of the game if the other team fumbles or whatever. But that's not how Norvell coached when he didn't have the horses. He was aggressive. He went for it on fourth downs. He's always kind of had that mindset of we're here to win this football game. We don't care who we're playing. Well, now you're seeing that with better athletes. So I think it feels like a change, but maybe this is kind of how he's always been, but now he has the horses to actually do it.
And that just carries down to your players, man. I'm a big Lions fan, as you guys can see from the background, stuff going on back there. And I'm proud to say that now, finally, for the first time in my life. But, I mean, look at Dan Campbell going for it on his own 17 in that game. That just trickles down. And when players see that the coaches have that same type of confidence in them, I think that just trickles all over everyone on the team. And we've gotten to see that with this Florida State team without a doubt. Sam asks, is Miami now our biggest game, and could we play them twice? We've talked about that a little bit here, but specifically on the Hurricanes, do you think they could make it to the ACC championship, Ira?
Yeah, man, definitely. I mean, I thought I felt for a while that it was probably maybe North Carolina or Pitt would be the other team if it wasn't Clemson that you play in the championship game. But yeah, man, it could definitely be. It could be Miami. Now, again, we'll have to see. Again, Miami, as I said before, Miami's had a lot of good Septembers. We'll see what they look like a month or two from now. I still think there's some questions there. But, man, Van Dyke is good, and he's got a better coordinator. They had a bad offensive coordinator. It didn't fit with him last year. And then, in the Florida State game, Florida State demolished Miami last year, but we also have to acknowledge that Van Dyke got hurt and didn't play in a lot of it. And again, they had those issues with coordinators. He changed his whole coaching staff. He's got 7 new assistants. I don't know that they all love each other. In fact, I was hearing stories that they don't, but they've got a lot. I mean, they did good work in the portal. They've got talent.
Chris has a general question about the ACC. He says, Ira, good to see you, and thank you both for the smash. Did you crunch the average viewership numbers the ACC put out for week 1, hashtag ACC math?
Yeah, it's funny. There was all that talk during the summer. I think this is what Chris is getting at. But during the summer, there was all the talk when Michael Alford and FSU were beating the drum that Florida State and Clemson and maybe Miami to some degree, and North Carolina, the schools that draw the biggest TV viewers should get more of the money from the conference. And you get this pushback from the Wake Forest and in the media that cover those schools that, Florida State hasn't even been that good lately. And then in the season opener, Florida State LSU brings in 9.1 million viewers. And when we tweeted about it, I had a couple of people come back at me, well, you were the only game on that night. Yeah. Compared to all the other Sunday night games on Labor Day weekend, when they're the only game, it was the second highest of all time. And this was at a time when, ESPN's in a big dispute with a big cable provider, Charter and Spectrum. Yeah. So there were people that couldn't even watch it if they wanted to. So no, it was a huge number. And it was good. I think it was good for, for the rest of the conference to realize that, if Florida State's good, you guys aren't in the same league with Florida State when it comes to drawing TV sets.
NoCab has wondered several times about Kentron. He says, where was Portier? Thoughts on Glenn taking third-string snaps over Duffy as well?
Yeah, Portier has been out there. He wasn't dressed out for that game. I think it's probably something minor. If you think about this game, you're playing Southern Miss. It's a game, you should win. You're favored by 30 points. Maurice Smith didn't play in that game at center. Robert Scott didn't play at that game at left tackle. Some other guys that maybe got a little banged up left early in the game. So if you see guys on the sideline, you can make a theory that maybe they're dealing with something minor and you want to make sure they're ready for when you play, whether it's BC this week or when you play Clemson the week after that. So I think there was probably some of that going on, in that game. As far as Kentron, though, I think, man, Kentron's a nice player. I mean, I think he'll be in that rotation before, this season, before the dust settles on the season. I think you're going to see Kentron be a big part of this offense.
Tom is wondering, this is an interesting question, is Fuller the best defensive coordinator in the ACC as of last night? What do you think?
Man, I'm the last person to ask. I mean, just because I don't watch all these other teams that much, a
Right.
lot of times they're all playing at the same time.
It's
I
got to
like
be
Adam.
up there, though.
I mean, I like Adam Fuller. I think he does a good job. I've defended him. If people watch Seminole headlines, Jeff and I have gotten into it a few times. We had a pretty good spirited conversation a few weeks ago about it. I think, players determine a lot of times how good a coordinator is. And last season, when a lot of fans were mad at Adam Fuller because teams were running the ball on them, they didn't have their defensive linemen. I mean, Robert Cooper was banged up. He had to get surgery after the year. He really was only playing through that just to kind of help the team. Fabian Levitt was injured for most of the year, and you just didn't have great depth on that defensive line. First dealt with injuries as well. Now you've got a much deeper, healthier defensive line. You've got, I think, healthier linebackers. Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach, I think, were banged up for a good part of last year, and you're seeing what this defense could be. So I think Fuller's done a really good job. I think he's good. I think he's solid. I don't know if he's the best in the ACC, but just because I don't watch enough for the other schools.
R. Wilmer wonders what our favorite play was in last night's game. I'm going to go kind of a different route. I liked seeing Vandravius Jacobs get that touchdown catch and run on the pass from Tate Rodemaker. I know you guys have been very high on Vandravius, and there were a couple questions in our pregame show about if he was in the doghouse or not. So it was good to see him come out there and get his first career touchdown. That was my favorite play. What about you?
Yeah, no, that was definitely a good one. He's really talented. I don't know whether or not he's in the doghouse, but I think that there's a lot that goes into earning the trust of the coaching staff, especially as a freshman, to get out there and play when you have a deep receiving core. So when he wasn't on that depth chart and people were freaking out, what I would try to tell people, it's not about talent. Like, he's got ability, but you got to make sure you're doing everything you need to be doing to make the coaches want to believe that you're going to be dependable in games. And so, man, you saw that talent. There's no doubt he's got that kind of ability. So it was good to see him get out there. If I had to pick one play, man, it's probably the Keon Coleman jump, just because I mean, he's special, man. I mean, like, he is. I knew he would be good, but he's so much better than I thought he was going to be. And again, like, that's the kind of play that I think gets everybody else around the team just fired up to play with that guy. So that was the play for me.
Last question, and then we'll get ready to sign off here on the Sunday Smash. P. Simpson wonders, is Corey nervous about all the bets he's going to have to pay off? Accountability.
Yeah, Corey might have to do some hour number twos. He might have to pour some champagne on his head this season. I think
we do some digging and check all our comments and all the bets that he's made with people.
Yeah, that's the challenge, man. Like, it's a challenge to make sure he actually lives up to it, because he suddenly can't remember. We need to keep a black book with the wagers on him. I think Clemson game is going to be a big one for him. I think he's got some debts to pay off if Florida State wins that game. And I just saw a comment you put up from Tony about Biscuit being his guy. Yeah, that was probably another one. Marquise and Douglas's touchdown I thought was really cool. Just to see that guy run at that speed, at that size. I hope they get him the ball more often. I mean, Jaheim Bell's fantastic. Morlock has become a great all-around tight end, but I think Biscuit's a rare combination of size and athletic ability. I think it'll be fun to see him get more opportunities.
One more question for you, Ira lied. Gator Kirk is wondering, how much better is the defense because of Surtain? I think, just looking from last year compared to this year, they're just way more aggressive in how they approach things, and we saw that the last 2 weeks, and it's fun to see. I hate seeing secondaries that are timid, just sit back and let things come to them. I think Surtain has certainly brought that aggressive nature and mentality into this defensive backfield.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, and thanks, Gator Kirk. Yeah, man, it's I think that's the biggest difference is, and Mike Norvell made a comment about it back in the spring. We kind of made a big deal at the time because he made a comment about there's a difference between trying to prevent big plays versus trying to make big plays. And I think Patrick Surtain kind of brings that mentality. It's kind of the mentality, like T-Buck played with, and, different guys that were great defensive backs that when the ball's up in the air, they feel like it's their ball. It's not just about trying to prevent getting beat, but it's, oh no, I'm going to go get that ball. And I think you see that. I thought, Conrad Hussey, a freshman, and again, you guys saw a glimpse of them last night in the game if you were watching the second half. But I'm telling you, this young group of defensive backs is phenomenal. I think Quindarius Jones and Hussey and Joseph and Kirkland and that Ashlyn Barker, the redshirt freshman, that whole group they're going to be studs. I mean, I really do. I think they're going to be studs. And you can see them coming in with that mentality. Hussey almost had the interception last night. And I think but again, just kind of that ball hawking mentality. Now the downside with that is maybe sometimes you give up a play here or there because you're being aggressive. But I think, after what Florida State fans have seen, we kind of saw the arc where for a few years, Florida State's DBs were getting torched. And then so now like they kind of went to where they're at least preventing the big plays, but now you want to see some. And now I think you're starting to see them produce those big plays. And, I think you're going to see more of that. And Patrick Surtain, is no question, is a big part of it.
Well, before we sign off, we appreciate everyone again for joining us here tonight on Sunday Smash. Appreciate everyone that's commented. Again, it feels like senior day for me. I've enjoyed getting to talk FSU football with you, Ira. What's coming up on the website here in the next couple days to look out for?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And we didn't get you out of the first TV timeout. We let you play the whole 60 minutes. Yeah, I think like I said, Matt's got a story about all the freshmen. That'll be coming up on the site. All the young guys, how much they played, how they did. I'll have a 3-2-1 coming, and then man, tomorrow we're back at it with actual coverage of game week. They're playing at Boston College this week. I'll be going up to Boston on Friday.
Nice.
BC is 1-1. They lost their opener to Northern Illinois, and then they beat Holy Cross by 3. So it is the red bandana game, and that's been a challenge for some teams in the past. They'll be fired up. That's the one game where their crowd seems to kind of get into it. But this does not seem to be BC's best team. So Florida State should have a good week, but plenty of coverage tomorrow. The press conferences, Mike Norvell, Adam Fuller, John Papuchis, Alex Atkins will meet with the media tomorrow around 11:30. So we'll have that completely covered, and then coverage of the rest of the week.
Well, thanks again for joining us, guys. For Ira, I am Ben. You guys tuned into the Sunday Smash, brought to you by Russ Forhis. We will see you tomorrow on Warchant TV and warchant.com for more great FSU coverage. Until then, have a great night, guys.